Chris Lee and Blake Lovell here to preview Week 1 matchup between Middle Tennessee State and Alabama. That's going to be Saturday, September the 2nd, 6:30 Central. The Vegas line has Alabama favored by 39 with a 55-point over-under, which implies a final score of 47-8. Like Alabama's done pretty well in openers. It's got a situation where it's going to probably be choosing between three quarterbacks. We don't know who that's going to be. We're doing this Monday, August the 7th. But very much looking forward to seeing what these two teams bring to the table on September the 2nd.
Yep, we always do these early previews just to kind of set the foundation for you to give you an idea of what to expect. But we will obviously update our thoughts on this game as we get closer once we know who Alabama's starting quarterback is going to be. Betting odds seem to suggest that will be Ty Simpson right now, Tyler Buchner behind that, Jalen Milroe behind him. But it's betting odds, and I think Nick Saban's thoughts on things will probably be more important than the betting odds on this. But an interesting matchup nonetheless. MTSU, Rick Stockstill's still there. Been there for quite a while now. And, hey, they're coming off an 8-win season. That was a step back in the right direction, I think, for them. But obviously have some production to replace, specifically when you look at the guys on the offensive side. So we'll see if perhaps there's a path for MTSU to score a victory against Alabama. I think, as you said, according to the spread, going to be hard to do as a probably close to 40-point underdog heading into this one.
Well, we are located in the Nashville area, so Murfreesboro, where MTSU's campus is, not too far from us. We've got some familiarity with that program, but it's weird. This was a program that had its bread buttered more on defense last year than offense. Stockstill has generally been an offensive coach where they rack up some numbers. They've run into some trouble when they played some Power 5 teams, although Miami says hello there. The Blue Raiders went to Miami last year and upset the Hurricanes there. But the offense wasn't very good a year ago. It did score 28.8 points a game, but really I think a lot of those points came off defense, which we'll get to that in a minute. Middle changing quarterbacks, losing some production, I think, in the run game and a receiver. It averaged a year ago when it tried to run the ball, 4.2 yards per play, 5.8 per pass play, turned it over 1.9% of snaps, which is exactly the rate that Alabama forced. The Crimson Tide gave up 4.5 yards per rushing play, just 4.7 per passing play. And again, that adjusts for sacks, but threw it 58% of the time. So I don't know. I think this is a matchup that, not surprisingly, is going to tilt pretty heavily in Alabama's favor.
Well, keep in mind, MTSU introduced the air raid offense last year with Mitch Stewart. So I think they're going to try to throw the ball. And I think it's just a matter of, can they do it as effectively, right? Is because Chase Cunningham, again, is not there. You have a new quarterback under center, and I think now maybe into year 2 with the air raid, can you do some things differently? But like you said, I think they do want to get a running game going. That would be nice to have. And like you said, the yards per carry numbers and stuff were not great last year. Frank Peasant's back. I think he had, almost 770-something yards, quite a few scores. So can they just keep him involved? Because that will be something they need for a team that has to replace its top 3 wide receivers. Jalen Lane transferred to Virginia Tech. They've got DJ England Chisholm coming back, and someone who we've seen just can have breakout performances, which I'm going to tie all together here in a second, Chris, when you go back to the Miami game. I've got a wild theme for you on that if you're trying to find an upset here. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's an offense with some questions still. And like you said, I think just the adjustment period maybe last year, but now you've got to change some personnel and having to replace quite a few, productive receivers and those kind of things. It's going to be tough going against an Alabama defense that just look at the names that are there. Jaheim Otis kind of, anchoring that front. Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, keep going down the line. Kevin Steele's back to take over the defense. They don't have as many returning starters maybe as they sometimes usually do, but it's Alabama, right? Defense is defense at Alabama. They're going to play some defense. And, so I think even with an offense like this that, runs a certain style, I feel like just trying to crack Alabama's defense is going to be a tall order for this MTSU team.
Yeah, Alabama gave up 18.2 points a game a year ago. Middle scored 28.8. All right, on the other side of the ball, I suspect we're going to see a heavy dose of the run. Alabama's got a pretty talented running back room, anxious to get our first glimpse at Justice Haynes, their star freshman who might be the next big one. You'll see McClellan and Williams a good bit. I don't know what you'll see at quarterback. But Alabama a year ago scored 41.1 a game. Middle gave up 27.7 a game. But when you look into that I think some of that might just be failure of offense and field position, because Middle, and if this game is closer than people think, circle this stat. MTSU last year forced turnovers on 3.3% of snaps. That is elite. It gave up 4.8 yards per rushing play, which is okay. 6.5 yards per passing play, which is okay. Alabama averaged 7.6 yards per pass play, 6.2 per rush play, and again, turned it over 1.9% of the time. Anything that stands out here on this side of the matchup, Blake?
Well, I mean, look, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. Like we said, we'll update our thoughts once we figure that out. But you have to, if you go beyond the quarterback, there's a lot of names there that can do some really good things. And I think, like you said, what's interesting is MTSU's defense was a team that maybe, they struggled statistically in a couple areas, as you can look at it, but it's like they still had 20 interceptions. I told you that it's like the college football news preview had a great stat. I think they have 67 takeaways past 3 years for this defense. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the key to success. If you're trying to pull off a huge upset like this, or, to have a shot, is forcing turnovers. And this is certainly a defense been able to do it. And they've got some experience there, and the guys that are there on that side. But like I said, on the Alabama offensive side, sure, all the talk's going to be around who's the quarterback going to be. And that is obviously the most important aspect of running your offense. But at the same time, you talked about the running back group, how many talented players are there. Any of those guys could go off for 100 yards at any time. It feels like that's the norm in Alabama. A lot of wide receiver production returning. I've added some speed to the mix. We talked about Malik Benson, what he could do, had a big spring there. J.C. Latham kind of leading the offensive line, even though they don't have a ton of starters returning there. And then it's just kind of looking at, what you're going to see from Tommy Rees' offensive approach. So a lot of fascinating elements for this Alabama offense heading into game one. And I think it makes it harder to predict exactly what the output's going to be, because there's new at quarterback, there's new at offensive coordinator. But man, there's a lot of returning production there too, that these guys are kind of established themselves and should take another step forward with an added year of experience under their belt. So.
Yeah, again, you take the line, you take the over-under. The final score, according to Vegas, 47-8. Last year, Middle Tennessee State did give up some points in a lot of these games, 35 to Western Kentucky, 40 at Louisiana Tech. I feel like Alabama in some of these games, because 38 is a lot of points, or 39. And I feel like time and time again in openers in the past, Alabama will be playing a team you're just going, man, I can't believe the spread's this high, whether it's Southern Cal or somebody like that. And then Alabama puts a 30 or 40 point beat down on whoever it is on the other side of the ball. And if you were looking at this at some other places, FPI and SP Plus are not encouraging in terms of the Blue Raiders keeping this close, because those both have this as a 41-point game.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll give you the covers numbers we always bring up. We like their betting trends. Again, we're not professional bettors. Let's put that out there. But there are always some interesting trends they give you. MTSU 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 non-conference games. Their over is 5-1 in their last 6 road games. Alabama, not a lot here that I see that's very interesting. Their under is 4-1 in their last 5 home games. But again, that's going to probably be SEC games, right? Maybe a non-SEC opponent thrown in there somewhere. But here's the thing, right? We look back at the Miami game last year for MTSU. And if you're trying to craft the scenario to a victory, right, to an improbable victory here for MTSU, which I think is a lot to ask for. But what did they do, Chris? And there were a couple things. Big plays.
Forced turnovers.
Well, they had forced turnovers, but they had a lot of big-time plays. DJ England-Chisholm, who we talked about earlier, 2 receptions for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a 98-yard touchdown in that game receiving. Jalen Lane, who I know is transferred, had an 89-yard reception in that game. Elijah Metcalf, 1 reception, 69 yards, and a touchdown. Big plays, right? Like, it's big playability if you're looking at an air raid offense. That's what you want to see. And so I think, again, it's just you're replacing the quarterback, though. And you said forced turnovers. 3 turnovers for Miami in that game. And so, look, we say all that to say, if you're trying to craft something MTSU-wise as a huge underdog, which they were not as huge of an underdog in the Miami game, but this one, that's what you have to do. You have to force turnovers. And again, maybe a new quarterback, you get a couple of those forcing turnovers early, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to pick Alabama to win the game. I think even as a non-professional bettor, I would be more intrigued by the over/under at 55. I'd probably take the under versus, I think you always say 40 points just feels like a lot of points, right? And it's hard for us to just go out and say, oh yeah, that's definitely going to win that game by 40 points. I have no idea. So I would rather probably go with the under on this one because I could see both defenses forcing some mistakes here, and maybe that limits the scoring opportunities. But still think Alabama, with all the weapons on offense, with all the big time playmakers on defense, it's just it's a big challenge for Rick Stockstill's team.
All right, we're here to cover every single SEC game this football season. Best way to get those, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics. Also, he is Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14, and we'll see you again soon.